I was about to take my pills when I heard my daughter on the phone. Just switch them tonight. No one will know. I froze. I quietly recorded everything, smiled, and handed her the phone when it rang again. It was the detective I'd just called. Subscribe to the channel, leave your like and comment from which part of the world you are watching. Get comfortable and relax. Let's begin. The pills rattled in the plastic organizer. I pressed Wednesday's compartment open with my thumb. The white oval of my blood pressure medication and the small yellow diuretic lay in my palm. The kitchen was quiet, lit only by the bulb over the stove. The familiar ritual was a comfort. The glass of water was already on the counter, condensation beading on its side. I lifted my hand to my mouth. That was when I heard her voice. It was a hushed, urgent sound from the hallway, just outside the pool of light. It was Chloe. She thought I was already in my bedroom. "Just switch them tonight," she said. Her tone was low, tense. "No, listen. Make it look like the pharmacy's error. The bottle is almost identical." A pause. I did not move. My hand, still holding the pills, lowered slowly to my side. "Exactly. Double the dosage, maybe triple. It has to be fast. No one will question a heart attack at her age." The world did not tilt. It did not spin. It simply hardened, as if the air in the kitchen had turned to glass. I could see everything with a terrible, sharp clarity. The pattern of the linoleum floor, the faint reflection of the stove light in the dark window over the sink, the pills, harmless in my hand. "I know the policy details," Chloe continued, her voice dropping further. "The house is paid off. It's enough to clear everything and start over. It's the only way." Another pause. I heard the soft scuff of her slipper on the hardwood. "Do it. I'll handle the rest after." There was a final muffled sound of agreement from the phone. Then her footsteps moved away down the hall toward the guest room. The house settled back into silence. I stood at the counter. I looked at the pills. I thought about placing them on my tongue, swallowing them down with the cool water. I thought about the mechanics of it. The absorption into my bloodstream, the constriction of arteries, the frantic, failing beat. I placed the pills, carefully, back into the Wednesday slot. I closed the lid. The click was loud in the quiet. My mind was not a storm of emotion. It was a blank, white room. Then, one memory surfaced. It was not a dramatic one. It was Chloe, at 8 years old, running a fever. I was sitting on the edge of her bed, holding a spoonful of cherry-flavored medicine. "Open up, baby," I had said. She had trusted me completely, opening her mouth without hesitation, making a face at the taste but swallowing because I told her it would help. I had smoothed her hair back from her damp forehead, my heart aching with a love so vast it felt like fear. The woman in the hallway was that child, the same voice, older, the same face, hardened. The spoon in my hand now held poison, and she was the one administering it. I moved then. My body felt detached, operating on an old, efficient protocol. I reached into the pocket of my robe. My phone was there. I pulled it out, my fingers steady. I opened the recording app. I had used it once before to capture a book club meeting discussion I wanted to remember. I touched the red circle. I held the phone loosely at my side and walked to the kitchen doorway. I could see the strip of light under the door to the guest room. I cleared my throat just audibly. The door opened a moment later. Chloe emerged, her own phone in her hand. She smiled. It was her normal smile, the one that crinkled the corners of her eyes. "All tucked in, Mom?" she asked. Her voice was light, sweet. The voice from the phone call was gone. "I was just getting my water," I said. My own voice sounded normal to me, a little tired perhaps. "Heading to bed now." "Okay, sleep well." She took a step toward me, as if for a hug, then seemed to think better of it. She waved with her phone instead. "I have a few more emails to send. Big day tomorrow." "Yes," I said, "a big day." I did not look directly into her eyes. I was afraid of what she might see in mine. I looked at her forehead, at the familiar arch of her eyebrow. "Good night, Chloe." "Night, Mom." I turned and walked down the dark hall to my bedroom. I closed the door. I locked it. It was a habit from when she was a teenager, and I wanted privacy. I had not used the lock in years. The sound of the bolt sliding home was solid, final. I sat on the edge of my bed. I stopped the recording. I played back the last 10 seconds, my own voice saying goodnight, her voice bright and false saying, "Night, Mom." It was not evidence of anything, but it was a point in time, a before and after. I placed the phone on my nightstand. I did not cry. The shock was too complete, too dense. It was a physical weight in my chest, behind my ribs. This was my daughter, my only child. I had raised her in this house. I had read to her in this room. I had worried over her grades, her friendships, her heartbreaks. I had paid for college from a salary that always felt too small. I had welcomed her back home 2 months ago when she said she needed to reset, that the city was too expensive, that she needed her mother. I had been glad. Loneliness had been creeping in since my retirement from the library. Her presence had filled the spaces. Now I understood what she had been filling them with: a plan, a timeline, an assessment of my life's value converted into a dollar amount, and a property deed. I got up and went to the window. The street was dark and still. A motion-sensitive light at the neighbor's house flicked on, triggered by a wandering cat. Everything looked ordinary. The world had not ended. Only my world had. The structure of it, the trust, the love, the assumed safety of family had collapsed inward with those few whispered sentences. I thought about calling someone. My sister, Linda, who lived 3 states away, my friend Margot from the library. But what would I say? "My daughter is trying to kill me." The words were absurd. They belonged on a television screen, not in my quiet, orderly life. Saying them aloud would make them real in a way I was not ready to face. It would also warn Chloe. I could not warn her. This was the realization that came next, cold and clear. This was not a moment for grief. Not yet. Grief was a luxury that came after safety. This was a moment for assessment, for strategy. She had said, tonight. The switch was to happen tonight. That meant the false pills, the deadly ones, were likely already in the house, or they would arrive soon. She would have to dispose of my current medication and replace it. She would do it when I was asleep. She thought I was asleep now. I looked at the door. I listened. The house was silent. No footsteps. She was in her room, waiting for me to fall into a deeper sleep. I changed into my nightgown. I brushed my teeth in the adjoining bathroom. I performed every part of the nighttime routine. Then I got into bed and turned off the lamp. I lay in the dark, my eyes open. I listened to the sounds of the house, the hum of the refrigerator, the creak of a floorboard settling, the distant rush of a car on the main road. I thought about the police. I thought about the law. I thought about justice as an abstract concept I had believed in while reading mystery novels. Now it was a concrete need, a path to survival. But to call now, hysterical, with no proof, they would come. They would talk to her. She would cry, explain it all as a misunderstanding, say her mother was confused, was getting older, was paranoid. They would believe her. She was young, articulate, convincing. I was an older woman, distressed. They would file a report. They would leave. And then I would be alone in the house with her again, and she would be more careful, more desperate. No, I could not react. I had to act. But acting required thought. It required a plan as calculated as hers. The first step was to not take the medication. That was simple. I would not swallow another pill from that organizer. I would feign illness if I had to, blame dizziness, anything to avoid the ritual she was watching. The second step was to secure evidence. The recording was a start, but it was nothing. I needed the substituted pills. I needed her to say more. The third step was to ensure my own protection within the law, to make myself a credible victim before I became a dead one. I heard her door open. A sliver of light appeared under my door. I closed my eyes, slowing my breathing into the long, deep rhythm of sleep. I heard her footsteps approach my door. They paused. I could feel her presence on the other side of the wood, listening. I did not move. After a minute, the footsteps receded back down the hall. She was checking. She was making sure the stage was set. I opened my eyes and stared at the ceiling. The weight in my chest began to change. It was still heavy, but it was no longer the dead weight of shock. It was the dense, cold weight of resolve. The love I had felt for 40 years was not gone. It was there, a vast, wounded thing. But it was now surrounded by something harder, a determination as clean and sharp as a surgical blade. She had made a calculation. She had calculated my age, my habits, my trust. She had calculated the probability of discovery as low. She had miscalculated one thing. She had calculated that a mother's heart would break and make her weak. She did not know that a breaking heart could also forge a weapon from its own shattered pieces. I lay in the dark, and I began to plan. The first move was mine. I would not sleep tonight. I would think, and when the morning came, I would begin. The resolve that formed in the dark was a practical thing. It required data. Grief was a fog, and I could not afford to be lost in it. I needed the clarity of numbers, of dates, of legal documents. At 3:17 a.m., according to the digital clock on my nightstand, I rose from the bed. I moved without sound, a skill perfected over years of late-night worries when Chloe was young. I put on my robe and tied the belt securely. I did not look at the door behind which my daughter slept. I walked past it down the hall to the small room I used as a home office. The door clicked shut behind me. I did not turn on the overhead light. The glow from the desk lamp was sufficient. The room was orderly, a sturdy oak desk, a filing cabinet, a bookshelf filled with biographies and historical novels. A framed photograph sat on the corner of the desk. It showed a younger me, my hair without the silver, holding a 6-year-old Chloe on my hip at a library picnic. We were both squinting in the sun, smiling. I turned the frame face down. The soft thud it made against the wood was the only concession to emotion I allowed. I sat in my leather chair, the one I had bought with my first retirement check. I woke the computer. The fan whirred softly. I navigated to the folder labeled Finances. I opened the PDF of my last will and testament. I had drafted it 5 years ago with a local attorney, a kind man named Mr. Davies. It was a simple document. In the event of my death, my entire estate was to pass to my sole heir, Chloe Marie Hayes. The house, fully paid for as of 7 years ago. The savings account, which held a modest sum for emergencies. The retirement account, which I lived off carefully. And the life insurance policy. I opened another file, the policy details from the insurance company. It was a 20-year term life policy I had taken out when Chloe started college. The thought then was that if anything happened to me, it would cover her tuition and give her a start. The term was nearing its end. The death benefit was $250,000, $250,000. To me, it was a safety net I hoped never to use. To someone in debt, it was a lifeline. To someone without scruples, it was a motive. I leaned back in the chair. The numbers on the screen were not surprising. I knew them. But seeing them assembled this way in the silent heart of the night, with the knowledge of the phone call fresh in my mind, created a new equation. House plus savings plus insurance equals clear motive. It was the clear everything and start over she had spoken of. I opened my budgeting spreadsheet. I tracked my expenses meticulously, a habit from decades of stretching a single income. I created a new tab. I labeled it Inquiry. I did not have access to Chloe's finances, but I could extrapolate. Her car was new, a sleek sedan she said was leased. Her apartment in the city had been expensive. She'd complained about the rent often. She liked nice clothes, dinners out, vacations she posted about online. She had a good job in marketing, but I knew the industry was volatile. She had mentioned being restructured out of her last position. The pieces fit together. Debt was a plausible pressure. But pressure did not justify this. Nothing justified this. A memory surfaced, unbidden. It was winter, and the old furnace in our rental house was failing. Chloe was 10. We huddled under blankets on the couch, wearing our coats indoors. I was reading her a book to distract her, my voice steady despite the cold knot of anxiety in my stomach. The repair cost would clean out my savings. She looked up at me, her small face serious. "When I grow up, I'm going to be rich, Mom, and I'll buy you the warmest house in the world." I had hugged her tight, her childish vow a greater warmth than any furnace could provide. The woman in the guest room was not that child. That child was gone. The person she had become saw the warm house I had finally bought not as a gift to share, but as an asset to liquidate. Saw my continued life not as a blessing, but as an obstacle. I closed the spreadsheet. I had confirmed the why. Now I needed to determine the how, my how. Reacting in anger would fail. Confronting her directly would give her the chance to explain, to manipulate, to accelerate her plan. I was a retired librarian, not a detective. But I was a researcher. I knew how to gather information and present a case. The law was the obvious instrument, but it was a blunt instrument. I needed to guide it, to shape the case so clearly that there was no room for doubt, no opportunity for her to weave a story of confusion or elder fragility. I needed to be the credible source. I needed evidence that even a skeptical detective could not dismiss. I considered the pills. The substituted medication was the primary evidence. I needed to find it and secure it without her knowing. I also needed a record of her intent. My phone recording was weak. I needed her to say more, to implicate herself while believing she was safe. A plan began to form, not as a flash of inspiration, but as a series of logical steps, like following a citation trail in an old journal. Step 1, act normally. No change in behavior. This would lull her. It would also give me time. Step 2, locate the false pills. They would be in her possession, perhaps in her purse or her room. Step 3, elicit a confession. This was the most delicate part. I would have to create a scenario where she felt secure enough to reveal her motives, thinking me a sympathetic, oblivious mother. Step 4, contact the authorities. But not with panic, with a calm, factual report of suspected elder abuse and attempted murder. I would present myself as a concerned citizen, myself, who had stumbled upon disturbing information. Step 5, let the system I had called upon take its course. It was a simple plan. Its success depended on my ability to perform, to smile at my daughter while knowing she was measuring my life in months, days, perhaps hours, to speak to her with affection while my heart was a block of ice. I looked at the time. It was 4:30 a.m. A pale pre-dawn light was beginning to soften the darkness outside the window. The night of planning was over. The day of execution would begin soon. I stood up. My body felt stiff, but my mind was clear. I turned off the desk lamp. In the gray light, I righted the fallen photograph. I looked at our smiling faces, frozen in a past that now felt like a story about other people. I traced the edge of the frame with my finger. There was no rage in that moment. There was a deep, abiding sorrow, and beneath it, a steely recognition. This was a transaction she had initiated. She had assessed my value and found it greater in death. She had initiated the terms. I would simply see the contract through to its logical, legal conclusion. The love I had felt was not deleted. It was placed in a separate compartment, sealed off for later examination, if ever. What remained in the forefront was focus. I left the office and went back to my bedroom. I did not sleep. I lay in bed and rehearsed. I practiced the tone of my voice for the morning. I decided on my first actions. I would make breakfast, as usual. I would ask about her day, as usual. I would be Eleanor Hayes, retired librarian, loving mother. It was a role I had lived for 32 years. I would play it now with more precision than ever before. When the proper time came, I would also play another role: the witness, the victim, the plaintiff. But that would come later. First, I had to lay the groundwork. The foundation of trust was already shattered. Now I would sweep up the pieces and use them to build a trap. The performance began at 8:05 a.m. I stood at the kitchen counter, the morning sun streaming through the window over the sink. I had made coffee. The scent was familiar, grounding. I heard Chloe's shower running down the hall. The sound was normal. It was the soundtrack of the past 2 months. I used the normality as a cue. I picked up the cordless phone from its base on the wall. My hands were steady. I had already looked up the non-emergency number for the local police department on my computer. I dialed. Each tone was a deliberate press of my finger. The call was answered on the third ring. Springvale Police Department, non-emergency line. Dispatcher Lewis speaking. The voice was female, professional, slightly weary. I allowed a small, deliberate pause. I softened my voice, let a faint quaver enter it. Not the quaver of fear, but of age, of uncertainty. "Oh, hello, yes, I hope I have the right number." I spoke slowly. "You've reached the police, ma'am. How can I help you today?" "It's probably nothing," I said, injecting a note of self-deprecation. "I'm an older woman, you see. Sometimes I worry too much. My daughter says I let my imagination run away with me." I mentioned Chloe deliberately. It framed me as a potentially dotty old mother, the exact persona I needed her to believe, while also planting the seed of the daughter's involvement. "It's always better to be sure, ma'am. What's concerning you?" The dispatcher's voice was patient, encouraging. "Well, it's about my medication. I have a heart condition." I paused, as if gathering my thoughts. "Last night, I was getting my pills ready. I have one of those organizers. And I thought I heard my daughter on the phone. She's staying with me for a while. She was in the hallway." I let my sentence trail off. "You heard her on the phone?" "Yes, it was late. The house was quiet. She didn't know I was there." I took a breath, a soft, shaky sound into the receiver. "She was talking to someone about my pills, about switching them. She said—" I paused again, longer this time, for effect. "She said something about making it look like the pharmacy made a mistake and that no one would question a heart attack at my age." There was a silence on the line. I could picture the dispatcher sitting up straighter, her fingers moving to a keyboard. "Ma'am, did you actually see any switched medication?" "Oh no, not yet. I put my pills away. I was scared to take them." That part was true. "I didn't sleep well. I keep thinking about it. She's my only child. It sounds so silly saying it out loud. Maybe I misheard." I was giving her the out, the opportunity to dismiss me. A good performance offers the audience a choice. Dispatcher Lewis did not take the out. Her voice became more focused, more formal. "Ma'am, this is a very serious allegation. Can you give me your name and address, please?" I gave her my information. Eleanor Hayes. My address. I spoke clearly, the quaver less pronounced now that I was giving factual data. "And your daughter's name?" Chloe Hayes. She's 32. I provided a brief physical description. "She's been staying here since February." "Have you confronted her about this?" "Oh, goodness, no." My voice took on a tone of mild horror. "I couldn't. What if I'm wrong? It would hurt her terribly. And what if I'm right?" I let the fear hang in the air, genuine and useful. "You did the right thing by calling, Mrs. Hayes. We take reports of potential elder abuse very seriously. This includes financial exploitation and, as you've described, potential harm." I heard the rapid clicking of keys. "I'm going to generate a report and forward it to our detectives. An officer will likely contact you for a follow-up. Can you confirm the best number to reach you?" I gave her my cell number. "I'm usually home," I added. "Okay, Mrs. Hayes, I need you to do something very important for me. Do not take any medication from your current supply. If you need your prescriptions filled, have your pharmacy deliver a new supply to you directly, or have a friend pick it up. Do not let your daughter handle your medications." "I understand," I said, my voice small. "I won't touch them. And for your safety, I would recommend not being alone with your daughter if you can avoid it until an officer makes contact. Do you have a friend or neighbor you can visit?" I think so. I'll arrange something." I had no intention of leaving my house. This was my battlefield, but I agreed to placate her. "Someone will be in touch, likely later today. Please stay by your phone." "I will. Thank you for listening to an old woman's worries." I hung up before she could respond further. I placed the phone back in its cradle. My hand remained on it for a moment. The kitchen was silent except for the drip of the coffee maker. The shower had stopped. Chloe would be out soon. I had done it. I had initiated the formal machinery. The report existed now in a database. My name was attached to it. Chloe's name was attached to it. The words elder abuse and potential harm were now in an official record. It was a small bureaucratic step, but it was the first move on the legal board. I had cast myself in the role of the vulnerable, confused senior. It was a costume that afforded me both protection and invisibility. No one expects a strategist in a robe and slippers. I poured a cup of coffee. I added a splash of milk, just as I always did. I heard her bedroom door open. Footsteps approached. Chloe entered the kitchen, her hair damp, dressed in leggings and a sweater. She smiled. "Morning, Mom. You're up early." "I didn't sleep very well," I said. It was the truth. I offered a tired smile in return. "Made coffee. You're a lifesaver." She went to the cupboard and took a mug. "Everything okay? You look a little pale." "Just a long night," I said, waving a dismissive hand. I took a sip of my coffee. The warmth was real. The bitterness was appropriate. "Maybe a little dizzy. I skipped my pills this morning. Thought I'd better not with this lightheadedness." I watched her closely. A flicker passed through her eyes, not concern, but calculation. She masked it quickly with a frown of care. "That's probably smart. You should call Dr. Evans if it continues." Her tone was perfect. The caring daughter. "I might," I said. I turned to look out the window as if distracted. "The weather looks nice today." "It does." She poured her coffee. The mundane exchange was surreal. We were two actors on a stage, both following scripts, but only one of us knew the play was a tragedy. The phone call to the police was the foundation. They would call back. A detective would come. I had set a wheel in motion. Now I had to build the case around it before they arrived. I needed the evidence to place in their hands. The performance for Chloe was now the most critical part. I had to be convincing as the unsuspecting mother. I had to make her feel secure, successful. I had to encourage her to make the final moves that would seal her own fate. I turned back to her, my face arranged into an expression of motherly affection. "What are your plans for the day, honey? Anything fun?" She shrugged, leaning against the counter. "Some work emails. Might go to the gym later. Not much." She was relaxed, confident. The phone call from the hallway was a secret she thought was safe. "Well, don't work too hard," I said. My voice was gentle. It was the voice that had soothed her childhood nightmares. Now I was using it to lull her into a waking one. "I was thinking of making that potato soup you like for dinner, if you'll be home." Her smile widened, genuine in its pleasure. "That sounds great, Mom. I'll definitely be here." "Good," I said. I picked up my coffee cup and walked slowly toward the living room, playing my part of the slightly frail, preoccupied mother. The next phase had begun. The bait was set. Now I had to wait for her to take it, all while the quiet, invisible clock of the police report ticked in the background. The smell of the potato soup simmering on the stove was a familiar, comforting anchor. I moved through the kitchen with a deliberate calm, chopping a spare stalk of celery to add to the pot. Chloe was in the living room, her laptop open on the coffee table, the soft tap-tap of her keyboard a periodic sound. The afternoon light was fading. I had spent the day in a state of heightened awareness, every sense tuned to her movements, her tone, her expressions. The police had not called yet? That was fine. It gave me time. My performance required amplification. Simple normality was not enough. I needed to project a vulnerability that would feed her confidence and a warmth that would disarm her. After lunch, I had gone to the hall closet and taken down a photo album. It was an old leather-bound thing, filled with pictures from Chloe's childhood. I brought it into the living room and sat near her. "Look what I found," I said, my voice tinged with nostalgic warmth. I opened it on my lap. "Remember this? Your first day of kindergarten." I pointed to a picture of a small Chloe in a too-big backpack, grinning with missing front teeth. She looked up from her laptop, a faint smile on her face. It seemed genuine, perhaps sparked by the image itself rather than any feeling toward me. "I cried when you tried to leave. You held onto my leg like a little koala," I said, laughing softly. The memory was real. The pain of recalling it now, under these circumstances, was a sharp, private thing. I turned the page. "And here's your 10th birthday party at the skating rink." She leaned over to look, closing her laptop slightly. I was so mad because Sarah Thompson got a better present than me. "You got over it," I said. I reached out and patted her hand where it rested on the couch cushion. The physical contact was a test, for both of us. Her skin was warm. She did not pull away, but her fingers stiffened slightly before relaxing. "You were always so passionate about everything." "Yeah, well." She shrugged, but she kept looking at the album. For a few minutes, we turned pages together. I commented on each picture, weaving a narrative of happy memories, of my dedication, of our bond. It was a laying out of the ledger, a silent reminder of all I had given. She made occasional comments, her tone softening incrementally. I could see her posture relax. She was viewing me not as an obstacle, but as a sentimental old woman lost in the past. It was exactly what I wanted. Later, as I stirred the soup, I saw her purse. It was a large, expensive leather tote slung over the back of one of the kitchen chairs. It had been there all day. My target was inside it, I was sure. The switched medication. She would not have left it in her room. She would want it close at hand for the moment she decided to make the swap, probably tonight after our cozy dinner. I needed to confirm it. I needed to see the bottle. An opportunity presented itself just before dinner. Chloe's phone buzzed on the counter. She picked it up, frowned at the screen, and walked quickly toward the back porch for privacy. "I have to take this," she said over her shoulder. "Work thing." The door slid shut behind her. I could see her through the glass, pacing, talking animatedly. This was my chance. My heart rate did not accelerate. My breathing remained even. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and walked to the kitchen table. I did not look toward the porch. I stood beside the chair holding her purse. My actions were slow, casual. If she glanced in, I would appear to be simply tidying up. I first picked up a stray napkin from the table and placed it in the trash. Then I adjusted the placement of the salt and pepper shakers. My hand finally fell to the top of her purse. The leather was smooth. I unsnapped the main clasp. The sound was soft. I opened the bag wide, blocking the view from the porch with my body. I looked inside. The contents were typical: a wallet, a makeup pouch, a set of keys, a pack of gum, a pair of sunglasses. My eyes scanned past them. There, nestled next to the wallet, was a small orange plastic vial with a white cap, a prescription bottle. I did not touch it. I leaned closer, squinting slightly. The label was facing away. I could not read it, but the size, the shape. It was identical to the bottle my blood pressure medication came in from the CVS on Maple Street, the one currently in my medicine cabinet upstairs. This was it, the replacement. I heard the slide of the porch door. I smoothly closed the clasp of the purse and turned toward the stove, picking up the wooden spoon. I began stirring the soup again. Chloe came back in, sliding her phone into her pocket. "Sorry about that," she said. "Client crisis." "Everything all right?" I asked, not turning around. It will be. Just need some handling. She came to stand beside me, peering into the pot. Soup smells amazing, Mom. It's ready whenever you are. I finally looked at her. I smiled. It was not the broad, performative smile from the photo album. It was a smaller, more intimate smile. The smile of a mother pleased to feed her child. I saw her absorb it. Her own smile in return was easier, more open. She was winning. In her mind, the plan was proceeding perfectly. Her mother was loving, trusting, and unsuspecting. The poison was in the bag, steps away. The stage was set. "Let me set the table," she offered, moving to the cupboard for bowls. "Thank you, honey." I watched her as she moved. There was a new lightness in her step. The weight of her debt, the anxiety of her plan, they seemed lifted. She believed the end was in sight. She believed she was clever. We ate dinner at the kitchen table. The conversation was light. She talked about a movie she wanted to see, a friend from college who was getting married. I listened, nodded, asked appropriate questions. I complimented her on a recent work project she'd mentioned in passing. I was laying it on thick, but with the subtlety of long practice. I was the supportive, admiring mother. Each affectionate word was a thread in the net I was weaving. When she finished, she insisted on doing the dishes. "You cooked. It's only fair." She began clearing the plates. I did not argue. "I think I'll go sit in the living room. My ankles are a bit swollen." This was a common, benign complaint. It fit my role. "Of course, Mom. Relax. I've got this." I walked slowly out of the kitchen. In the living room, I settled into my armchair. I did not turn on the television. I sat in the quiet, listening to the sound of running water and the clatter of dishes from the kitchen. I looked at her purse, still slung over the chair back. The vial inside it was a silent, deadly fact. I had confirmed the bait. The evidence was physically present. Now I needed her to commit to the next step. I needed her to believe the time was right to switch the bottles. To do that, I had to reinforce her confidence, and I had to provide her with an opportunity. My next move was already clear. I would go to bed early, pleading fatigue from my dizzy spell. I would make a show of being unwell, vulnerable. I would leave my bedroom door slightly ajar. I would pretend to fall quickly asleep. I would give her the cover of darkness and the assurance of my slumber to make her move, and I would be ready. My phone would be recording from my nightstand. The police non-emergency line had been called. The wheels were in motion. Now I just had to guide the vehicle to the precise point of impact. The dishes were done. Chloe walked into the living room, drying her hands on a towel. "All clean." "Thank you, sweetheart." I gave her a weary, loving smile. "I think I'll turn in early. It's been a long day." "You do look tired," she said, her voice full of a concern that almost sounded real. "Get some good rest." "I will." I pushed myself up from the chair, a small groan escaping me, not entirely feigned. The exhaustion was real, but it was not from physical ailment. It was the strain of the performance, the weight of the knowledge. I walked toward her. I stopped, and, as I had planned, I opened my arms. "Good night, Chloe." She hesitated for only a fraction of a second before stepping into the hug. She smelled of soap and dishwater. Her arms went around me. It was the first time we had hugged since I heard her in the hallway. My body wanted to stiffen, to recoil. I forced it to remain pliant, accepting. I gave her a gentle squeeze. "I love you," I said into her shoulder. The words were ash in my mouth. "Love you too, Mom," she murmured back. Her embrace was quick, then she released me. I turned and walked down the hall to my bedroom. I did not look back. I could feel her eyes on me, watching my slow, tired progress. I closed my door, leaving it open a deliberate 2 inches, a clear invitation. I got into bed, my back to the door. I placed my phone on the nightstand, screen down. I closed my eyes. I lay perfectly still, listening. The house was quiet. Then I heard the soft, definitive snap of her purse clasp opening in the kitchen. The sound of the clasp was followed by the faint rustle of items being moved. I held my breath, not moving a muscle in the bed. My ears strained against the silence. I heard the careful click of a cabinet door opening in the hall bathroom, the medicine cabinet. A pause. Then the soft slide of a bottle being placed on the glass shelf. The cabinet door closed again, a muffled thud. Then footsteps moved away back toward the kitchen. The refrigerator door opened and closed. Water ran in the sink. Normal nighttime sounds. She was covering her activity with the routine of getting a glass of water. After a few minutes, I heard her bedroom door shut softly. I waited another 20 minutes, counting slowly in my head. The house settled into a deep quiet. Only then did I move. I slid out of bed. I did not turn on any lights. The glow from the digital clock provided enough illumination to move by. I went to the hallway bathroom. I stood before the medicine cabinet. I opened it. My regular bottles were lined up on the second shelf. The blood pressure medication, the diuretic, a bottle of aspirin, some vitamins. I reached for the blood pressure medication. I picked it up. It felt normal in my hand. The label looked correct. But when I shook it gently, the pills inside made a slightly different sound. Less of a rattle, more of a duller shuffle. The quantity seemed the same. She had been careful to replicate the fullness. This was the swapped bottle. The lethal dose. She had taken my legitimate medication and left this in its place. My real pills were likely in that orange vial in her purse or already disposed of. I placed the bottle back exactly as I had found it. I closed the cabinet. I returned to my bedroom. The physical evidence was now in position. The trap was armed. But I needed more. A prosecutor would need motive and intent beyond circumstantial evidence. I needed her voice admitting to the pressure, to the desperation. I needed her to justify the crime without saying the words. The next morning, I implemented the next phase. I rose early again. I made coffee. I waited for her to emerge. When she did, I offered a warm smile. "Good morning. Sleep well?" "Like a rock," she said, stretching. She looked refreshed, triumphant even. "You?" "A bit better," I said, rubbing my temple. "Still a little off, but better. I think I'll sit on the porch later. The fresh air might help." "That's a good idea." She poured her coffee, her movements relaxed. After breakfast, I brought my tea out to the back porch. It was a small enclosed space with 2 wicker chairs and a view of the modest backyard. I arranged myself in one chair, a light blanket over my legs despite the mild day. Another detail of frailty. I placed my phone on the small table beside me, screen down. The recording app was open, the red circle already tapped. It was now recording the ambient sound of birds and distant traffic. I waited. About an hour later, as I knew she would, Chloe came out to join me. She carried her own mug and her phone. She sank into the other chair with a sigh. "It's nice out here." "It is," I agreed softly. I sipped my tea. I let a comfortable silence stretch between us. Then I spoke, keeping my gaze on the budding tree at the back fence. "You know, I've been thinking." "About what, Mom?" "About you." I turned to look at her, my expression one of gentle concern. "These past few months you've seemed stressed, more than usual. Even before you moved back home, I see it in your shoulders, in your eyes." She shrugged, looking down at her phone. "It's just work, the economy. You know how it is." "I do know," I said, "but it feels like more than that. A mother can tell." I paused, letting the sentimental notion hang. When your father left and it was just us, the stress was immense. The bills, the mortgage on that old place, the fear of not having enough. I was telling the truth, drawing from a real well of memory. I remember lying awake, calculating how to make the grocery money last one more week. It's a terrible weight. Her face softened slightly. She was listening. I had tapped into a shared history, a genuine point of connection. "I see that same weight on you, Chloe," I continued, my voice barely above a whisper. "I may be old, but I'm not blind. Is it money? Are you in some kind of trouble?" She looked at me then, a complex series of emotions crossing her face. I saw hesitation, then a flicker of condescension. She saw a worried old woman offering a shoulder to cry on. She saw an opportunity to vent, to justify her own tension, without revealing her solution. She underestimated me completely. Yeah, it's money, Mom. She let out a long, dramatic sigh as if confessing a great burden. It's just a mess. My credit cards are maxed. The lease on my car is insane. Student loans. I've got, let's just say it's a lot. More than I can handle with my current job. She shook her head, a wry smile on her lips. You have no idea what it's like for my generation. Everything costs so much. The dream is just out of reach. I nodded slowly, my face a mask of sympathy. That sounds incredibly hard. I wish I could help more. I let the offer hang, knowing she would dismiss it. My limited income was not the solution she wanted. I know you do, Mom, but it's okay. It's my problem to solve. She said it with a note of finality, of false bravery. But how? I pressed gently, innocently. That kind of debt, it can feel like a life sentence. I remember feeling trapped, like there was no way out. I was handing her the rationale. I was articulating the desperation she felt. She took the bait. Her eyes took on a distant, hard look. Sometimes, she said, her voice dropping, you just need a fresh start, a clean slate. You need to wipe it all away so you can breathe again, whatever it takes. The last 4 words were uttered with a quiet intensity that had nothing to do with budgeting or second jobs. I held her gaze, my own eyes wide with a feigned, naive concern. Whatever it takes. That sounds so drastic, honey. Nothing is worth your peace of mind. She blinked, as if realizing she had said too much. The condescending smile returned. Don't worry about it, Mom. I'm just venting. I'll figure it out. I always do. She took a long drink from her mug, effectively ending the confession. I leaned back in my chair, pulling the blanket up a little higher. I'm sure you will, sweetheart. You're so capable. I turned my face back to the yard, as if tired by the emotional exchange. We sat in silence for a few more minutes before she made an excuse about a work call and went back inside. I stayed on the porch until I heard her footsteps move upstairs. Then I reached over and stopped the recording on my phone. I played back the last minute. The audio was clear. My leading questions about stress and money, her confession of overwhelming debt, my statement about feeling trapped with no way out. Her response, sometimes you just need a fresh start, a clean slate. You need to wipe it all away so you can breathe again, whatever it takes. It was not a direct admission of murder, but paired with the switched medication, the life insurance policy, and her phone call about a heart attack, it was a powerful statement of motive. It revealed a mindset that justified extreme action. A prosecutor could use it. A jury would understand it. I had my evidence. The final piece was now a digital file, saved and backed up to a cloud account I rarely used. The foundation of the case was complete. The bait had been taken, the switch had been made, and the motive had been recorded. All that remained was to spring the trap. I sat on the porch, the morning sun warm on my face, and I felt nothing but a cold, satisfied certainty. The next move was no longer mine to make. It was time for the law to enter the stage. I remained on the porch until the tea in my cup grew cold. The recording was secured. The plan was now a sequence of established facts, waiting for the final trigger. I looked at the time. It was just past noon. I had hours before the evening, before the performance reached its peak. I decided to use them with intention. I went inside. The house was quiet. Chloe was upstairs in her room, likely on her laptop. I went to the kitchen and opened the deep freezer in the garage. In the back, behind frozen vegetables and packages of meat, I found what I was looking for, a container of homemade chicken stock. I had made it months ago, freezing it for future use. I set it in the sink to thaw. Then I went to the pantry. I took down the bag of stone-ground yellow cornmeal. I checked the refrigerator for buttermilk. There was a fresh carton. I gathered an onion, a green bell pepper, celery, and a can of crushed tomatoes. I laid each item on the counter with deliberate care. I was making Chloe's favorite meal, chicken and sausage gumbo with a side of hot water cornbread. It was a dish from my own mother's repertoire, one I had made for every birthday, every celebration, every time she needed comfort. It was a meal that took hours. It required focus. It was a ritual. I began by making the roux. I measured equal parts flour and oil into my heaviest cast iron pot. I turned the flame to medium-low. I began to stir. The mixture was pale at first, then it turned a light tan. I stirred without stopping. The color deepened to peanut butter, then to a rich copper penny, and finally to the color of dark chocolate. It was a process that could not be rushed. A single moment of distraction would burn it, ruining the base with a bitter taste. The steady circular motion of the wooden spoon was meditative. The rich, nutty aroma filled the kitchen. As I stirred, I let myself remember. Not the recent memories of betrayal, but the older ones. I remembered Chloe at 12, leaning over this same pot, her eyes wide as I explained how the roux was the foundation of the whole dish. You have to watch it, baby. You have to be patient. It tells you when it's ready. She had been fascinated. I remembered her at 20, home from college for Thanksgiving, standing right here and telling me her roommate had never had gumbo. Can I take some back with me, Mom? I want to show her what real food tastes like. The pride in her voice had been a tangible thing. Those memories were real. They were also finished. They belonged to a different timeline, one where the woman upstairs was still the girl in those memories. I acknowledged their truth, and then I set them aside. They were ingredients no longer relevant to the recipe I was following today. When the roux was perfect, I carefully added the chopped onion, pepper, and celery. The sizzle was violent, releasing a cloud of fragrant steam. I stirred the vegetables until they softened, coating them in the dark, flavorful paste. I added the thawed stock, the can of tomatoes, the bay leaves, and the thyme. I brought it to a slow simmer. The gumbo would need at least 3 hours now, the flavors merging and deepening. I cleaned the cutting board and washed the knife. I then prepared the cornbread mixture, stirring the cornmeal, buttermilk, egg, and a pinch of salt until it was just combined. I would cook it later, in a screaming hot skillet so it would form a crisp, golden crust. The afternoon passed in a haze of simmering aromas. Chloe came downstairs around 4. She stood in the kitchen doorway, inhaling deeply. "Is that gumbo?" "It is," I said, not turning from the stove where I was browning the andouille sausage and chicken thighs. "What's the occasion?" she asked. Her voice held genuine pleasure, but beneath it I detected a note of something else. Satisfaction, perhaps. She saw this as a celebration of her impending success. A Last Supper, indeed. "No occasion," I said, my back still to her. "I was in the mood to cook, and I know you love it." I finally turned, offering a soft smile. "It's been a while since I made it." "It smells incredible." She came closer, peering into the pot. "You're the best, Mom." I accepted the compliment with a slight nod. I added the browned meats to the gumbo pot. The scent intensified. "It'll be ready at 7. Will you be home?" "I wouldn't miss it for the world," she said. She sounded sincere. In her mind, she probably wouldn't. She went into the living room. I remained at the stove, adjusting the heat, skimming a trace of fat from the surface. The methodical work kept my hands busy and my mind clear. I was not thinking about the police call or the recording or the bottle in the medicine cabinet. I was thinking about the balance of spice, the thickness of the gravy, the doneness of the chicken. At 6:30, I made the cornbread. I poured the batter into the shimmering hot skillet. It crackled and hissed, forming a perfect round cake. When it was browned on the bottom, I flipped it with a confident jerk of my wrist. The other side began to crisp. I set the table. I used the good linen placemats, the cloth napkins. I set out the soup bowls and the small plates for cornbread. I lit a single candle in the center of the table. The dining room looked warm, inviting, a stage set for a final act. At 7, I called her. "Dinner's ready." She came in, her face glowing in the candlelight. She had changed into a nice sweater. "This looks amazing, Mom. Like a real feast." "Sit," I said. I brought the gumbo pot to the table on a trivet. I brought the skillet of cornbread, turned out onto a plate. I served her first, ladling a generous portion into her bowl, placing a wedge of cornbread beside it. Then I served myself. We began to eat. The only sounds were the clink of spoons against bowls, the soft tearing of cornbread. The gumbo was perfect. The roux had achieved its deep, complex flavor. The chicken was tender, the sausage spicy. The cornbread was crisp on the outside, tender within. "This is just like I remember," Chloe said, closing her eyes for a moment as she tasted it. "Nobody makes it like you." "Thank you," I said. I watched her eat. I watched the genuine enjoyment on her face. She was savoring the meal, savoring the moment. She was, I knew, also savoring the thought of her future, unburdened and funded. This meal, for her, was a punctuation mark on our old relationship, a delicious goodbye. For me, it was something else. It was an act of closure. Each bite I took was a conscious acknowledgement. I was tasting the past, all the love, the effort, the shared history contained in this recipe. I was also tasting the end. This was the last meal I would ever cook for my daughter, the last time we would sit at this table together, the last normality. I did not try to make conversation. I let the food speak. I ate slowly, deliberately, committing the sensory details to memory, the warmth of the bowl in my hands, the steam rising, the mix of textures. I was saying goodbye to the child I raised. The person eating across from me was a stranger, but the ghost of that child was in the room, in the recipe, in my heart. This meal was for that ghost. When she finished, she leaned back in her chair with a contented sigh. "I'm stuffed. That was incredible." "I'm glad you enjoyed it," I said, my voice even. She helped me clear the table. We worked side by side in the kitchen, scraping plates, wrapping leftovers. The domesticity of it was almost painful in its normalcy. It was the last chore we would ever share. When the kitchen was clean, she gave me another hug. "Thank you for dinner, Mom. Really, it meant a lot." I returned the hug briefly, then released her. "You're welcome." I did not say, "I love you" again. I had used those words as tools enough. Tonight, I let their absence speak. She went to the living room to watch television. I went to my bedroom. I closed the door. I did not lock it. The performance of trust was over. The preparations were complete. The meal was eaten. The stage was now empty, waiting for the final players to arrive. I sat on the edge of my bed and waited for the phone to ring. The next move was out of my hands. I had done all I could. Now I just had to answer. I sat on the edge of my bed and watched the clock. The digital numbers glowed 8:17 p.m. The house was quiet except for the muffled sound of a television laugh track from the living room. Chloe was watching one of her sitcoms. The ordinary noise was a stark contrast to the silence in my head. I had entered a state of pure waiting. I stood up and began my pre-bedtime routine. I went into the bathroom and brushed my teeth. I avoided looking directly at the medicine cabinet. I washed my face, patting it dry with a soft towel. I changed into my nightgown. Each action was performed slowly, methodically, as if I were moving through water. I was creating the visible pattern of a woman preparing for sleep. The performance was almost over, but this last act required precision. I returned to the bedroom and sat on the bed again. I picked up my current novel from the nightstand, a historical biography, and opened it to the marked page. I did not read a single word. My eyes scanned the lines, but my attention was fixed on the phone beside me. It was a cordless handset, its green power light a steady dot in the dim room. According to the dispatcher, a detective would contact me. They had not specified a time. It could be tonight. It could be tomorrow. The uncertainty was part of the plan's friction. I had to be ready for either. But I hoped for tonight. The tension of maintaining the facade was a tangible strain. I wanted it resolved. The laugh track from the television swelled again. I heard Chloe shift on the couch, the creak of the springs. A commercial break came on, the volume suddenly louder with an energetic jingle for a car dealership. Then it cut back to the softer dialogue of the show. My phone rang. The sound was sharp, electronic, and very loud in the quiet room. I did not startle. I had been waiting for it. I looked at the caller ID. It read Springvale PD and a general station number. I let it ring a second time. I took a slow, deliberate breath. I picked it up on the third ring. "Hello?" I said. My voice carried a note of polite curiosity, tinged with the slight weariness of an older woman answering an evening call. "Good evening. May I speak with Mrs. Eleanor Hayes, please?" The voice was male, mature, and devoid of warmth. It was all business. "This is she." "Mrs. Hayes, this is Detective Roy Miller with the Springvale Police Department. I'm following up on a report you made earlier today regarding a concern about your medication." He spoke clearly, without rushing. "Oh, yes. I spoke with a very nice woman on the phone." I allowed my voice to soften further, adding a touch of uncertainty. "I hope I didn't cause any trouble. It's probably nothing." "It's no trouble at all, ma'am. We take these reports seriously. I'd like to ask you a few questions, if that's all right." His tone was patient but firm. He was assessing me, I knew, determining if I was confused, credible, or both. "Of course. Whatever you need." I settled back against my headboard, as if getting comfortable for a chat. "You reported overhearing a conversation last night in which your daughter, Chloe Hayes, discussed switching your medication. Can you tell me again, in your own words, what you heard?" I repeated the essence of the conversation, using the same hesitant, self-doubting language I had used with the dispatcher. I was in the kitchen. She was in the hall. She was on the phone. She said something about switching pills to make it look like the pharmacy did it. She said, "No one would question a heart attack at my age." I paused. It sounds so dreadful saying it out loud. She's my daughter. "I understand this is difficult," Detective Miller said. His voice remained neutral. "You mentioned you have not confronted her." "No, I couldn't. What if I'm wrong? I would break her heart. And what if I'm right?" I let the fear seep into my words, genuine in its source, if not in its presentation. "That was a prudent decision, Mrs. Hayes. Confrontation can sometimes escalate a situation." I heard papers shuffling on his end. "The dispatcher advised you not to take any of your current medication. Have you?" "No, sir, I haven't touched it. I've been feeling a little dizzy anyway, so I thought it best to skip a dose or two." This aligned with my earlier comments to Chloe. "Good. Now, you said your daughter is currently living with you. Is she there now?" "Yes. She's in the living room watching television." I said it plainly. "I see." There was a pause. I could almost hear him thinking. "Mrs. Hayes, based on your report, we have sufficient concern to open an investigation. Would you be willing to speak with me in person? I can come to your home now." This was the critical moment. This was the trigger. Tonight? Oh my, it's rather late. I injected a flutter of elderly concern about the hour. "It is, but given the nature of the allegation, potential attempted harm, it's best to act promptly. I can be there in about 15 minutes. I hesitated, precisely long enough to seem hesitant. "Well, if you think it's important, I suppose so. I don't want to make a scene. The goal is to ensure your safety, ma'am, as discreetly as possible. I will need to speak with your daughter as part of this. Is that acceptable?" This was the final piece, the request I had been waiting for. "Speak with Chloe? About this?" "Yes, to get her side of the story. It's standard procedure." I let out a resigned sigh, the sound of a woman surrendering to officialdom. "All right, if you must. She's right here in the living room. Good. I'll be there shortly. Do not alert her to my visit. Simply go about your business as normal. I will knock on the front door. I understand. My voice was a whisper. See you soon, Mrs. Hayes. He hung up. I placed the phone back in its cradle. The green light continued to glow. I looked at the clock. 8:24 p.m. In approximately 15 minutes, Detective Roy Miller would arrive at my door. The mechanism I had set in motion was now at the threshold. I did not move immediately. I listened to the television. The sitcom was ending. I heard the closing theme music. Chloe would be getting up soon, perhaps to get a drink or go to her room. I needed to be in position. I stood up. I walked to my bedroom door and opened it. The hallway was dark, but light spilled from the living room. I could see the flickering blue glow of the TV screen. I stepped out and walked slowly down the hall, my slippers whispering on the hardwood. I appeared in the living room doorway. Chloe was stretching on the couch, reaching for the remote to turn off the TV. She saw me and smiled. Hey, Mom, heading to bed? In a moment, I said. My voice was calm. I leaned against the doorframe, mimicking a tired posture. I just got off the phone. Oh? Who was calling so late? She clicked off the television. The room was suddenly illuminated only by a single lamp. It was a detective, I said. I kept my gaze on her face. I watched her eyes. From the police department. Her smile froze. It did not fall. It simply stiffened, like plaster. The casual ease drained from her posture. A detective? What for? Her voice was careful, too controlled. He said he's following up on a report. I delivered the next line with a bland, almost puzzled tone. Something about my medication. He has some questions for you, Chloe. Her face went pale. The color receded from her cheeks, leaving 2 stark spots of blush she had applied earlier. Her eyes widened, then darted toward the hallway, toward the bathroom where the medicine cabinet was. I saw the rapid calculations behind her eyes. Denial, panic, the desperate search for an explanation. Questions for me about your medication? That's ridiculous. She attempted a laugh, but it came out as a short, dry cough. She stood up from the couch, her movements jerky. What did you tell them, Mom? I just told him what I thought I heard. I remained in the doorway, a barrier between her and the hall, between her and any chance to flee or destroy evidence. He said he's on his way over. He'll be here soon. The words landed with physical force. She took a step back as if pushed. Her hand rose to her throat. You called the police on me? The accusation was out, sharp and shocked. I reported a concern, I corrected her, my voice still quiet, steady. They're the ones who decided to come. The doorbell rang. The sound was a clean, clear chime that echoed through the silent house. It was the sound of the end beginning. Chloe's head snapped toward the front door. Her breath caught. She looked back at me, her expression now a mask of pure, undiluted panic. The confident plotter was gone. In her place was a trapped animal. I did not move to answer the door. I simply looked at her. That will be Detective Miller, I said. The doorbell chimed a second time. The sound was insistent, a demand for entry. Chloe stood frozen in the center of the living room, her eyes locked on mine. The panic had hardened into a sharp, desperate calculation. You can't just let him in, she whispered harshly. Send him away. Tell him you made a mistake. You're confused. I did not respond. I turned my back on her and walked to the front door. My steps were measured. I could feel her stare burning into my back. I opened the door. A man stood on the porch. He was in his 50s with close-cropped gray hair and a solid build beneath a dark winter coat. He held up a leather wallet, flipping it open to show a gold badge and an identification card. Mrs. Hayes, I'm Detective Miller. Yes, please come in. I stepped aside. He entered, his eyes scanning the foyer and the living room beyond with a practiced, neutral gaze. He saw Chloe standing there, rigid. He gave a short, professional nod. Miss Hayes. Chloe said nothing. Her arms were crossed tightly over her chest. I closed the door. The click of the latch was final. The 3 of us stood in the small foyer, an awkward triangle. Detective Miller turned to me. "Thank you for seeing me, ma'am. As I said on the phone, I need to ask you both some questions. It might be easier to sit down." "We can sit in the living room," I said. I led the way, feeling both of them follow. I took my armchair. Detective Miller took the sofa. Chloe remained standing, hovering near the television. "Miss Hayes, please," Miller said, gesturing to the other end of the sofa. Reluctantly, she sat, perching on the very edge of the cushion, as far from him as possible. Detective Miller took a small notebook from his coat pocket. "Mrs. Hayes, you reported overhearing a conversation last night that caused you concern for your safety. Can you recount that for me again, now that your daughter is present?" I repeated the same words. I kept my tone factual, but laced with a hint of sorrow. I was in the kitchen preparing my medication. Chloe was in the hallway, on her phone. I heard her say that someone should switch my pills. She said to make it look like the pharmacy's error. She said no one would question a heart attack at my age. I looked directly at Chloe as I finished. Her face was a mask of outraged innocence. "That is a lie," Chloe said, her voice too loud in the quiet room. She turned to Detective Miller, her body angling toward him in a plea for belief. "I never said that. My mother has been confused lately, forgetful. She misinterprets things. I was probably talking to a friend about my own stress, about maybe switching my antidepressants. She must have misheard." It was a good, quick lie. Plausible. It painted me as the frail, misunderstanding elder. Detective Miller's expression did not change. He wrote something in his notebook. "You deny having any conversation about switching your mother's medication?" "Absolutely," Chloe said, her voice firming. "I would never. I love my mother. I'm here taking care of her." Miller nodded slowly. He looked at me. "Mrs. Hayes, you said you haven't taken any of your medication since last night." "That's correct." "Where is your current medication located?" "In the hall bathroom medicine cabinet. The bottle for my blood pressure pills is on the second shelf." "Would you consent to me taking a look at that bottle?" "Of course." I began to rise. "I'll get it," Chloe said, springing up from the couch. "I know where it is." She was eager, trying to control the narrative to get to the bottle first. "Actually," Detective Miller said, his voice calm but authoritative, "I'd prefer if Mrs. Hayes showed me. Standard procedure." He looked at me. "If you wouldn't mind, ma'am." I stood. "Not at all." I walked out of the living room. I heard Miller get up and follow me. Chloe trailed behind, a silent, anxious shadow. In the bathroom, I opened the medicine cabinet. I pointed to the bottle. "That one." Detective Miller put on a pair of thin blue latex gloves. He took the bottle from the shelf. He examined the label. "This is your prescription." "From CVS Pharmacy?" "Yes." He opened the bottle and shook a few pills into his gloved palm. They were white, oval. They looked identical to my usual pills. He studied them, then looked back at me. "These appear to be correct, but you said you believed they might have been switched." "I believe they were," I said. My voice was steady. "I also believe the pills that were taken from this bottle are currently in my daughter's possession." A sharp intake of breath came from the doorway where Chloe stood. "What? That's insane." Miller looked from me to Chloe. "Miss Hayes, would you consent to a search of your personal belongings here in the house, specifically for a prescription bottle?" "No, I will not. This is a violation of my rights. She's making this up." Chloe's composure was cracking, her words coming fast. "You are not under arrest," Miller said evenly. "This is a consensual search. You can refuse. However, your refusal may be noted in my report." He let the implication hang. He then looked back at the bottle in his hand. "I'm going to need to take this for testing, to verify the contents." "Take it," I said. "Mom, you can't just let him take your medication. You need that." Chloe's protest was frantic, a misplaced concern that only highlighted her fear of the analysis. "I have refills," I said. I turned from the bathroom and walked back into the living room. Miller followed, sealing the bottle in a clear evidence bag. Chloe stumbled after us. We resumed our positions. The atmosphere was now charged, brittle. Miller placed the evidence bag on the coffee table. It sat between us like an accusation. "Miss Hayes," Miller said, his tone shifting slightly. It was harder now. "Your mother also expressed concern about your financial situation being a possible motive. She indicated you are under significant debt." Chloe's eyes shot to me, blazing with betrayal. "You discussed my private finances with the police?" "I answered the detective's questions," I said quietly. "That is none of your business," she snapped at Miller. "In a potential murder for hire or elder abuse investigation, financial motive is very much our business," he replied, unflinching. "Would you like to comment on your financial state? I have debt. So does half the country. That doesn't mean I'm a killer." She was shouting now, her careful facade shattered. "No one has called you a killer," Miller said, his voice dangerously calm. "Yet, I am simply gathering facts. Your mother has a life insurance policy. You are the sole beneficiary. Is that correct?" Chloe paled again. She had not expected him to know that detail so quickly. She said nothing, her mouth a tight line. I saw the moment arrive, the moment I had planned for. I reached into the pocket of my robe. I took out my cell phone. I placed it on the coffee table next to the evidence bag. "Detective Miller," I said. My voice cut through the tension, clear and cold. "Yesterday afternoon, I had a conversation with my daughter on the back porch. I recorded it. You may find her comments about her financial distress and her need for a fresh start illuminating, particularly the part where she says, 'whatever it takes.'" Chloe's face dissolved. The color drained completely, leaving her looking gaunt, hollow. Her eyes were fixed on the phone as if it were a venomous snake. You recorded me?" I did not look at her. I kept my eyes on Detective Miller. "The recording is queued to the relevant section. The passcode to unlock the phone is 8194. My birth year, backwards." Miller looked from me to Chloe. He saw her expression, the guilt, the terror, the utter defeat. He picked up my phone. "Thank you, Mrs. Hayes." He did not unlock it yet. He looked at Chloe. "Miss Hayes, before I listen to this, is there anything you'd like to tell me? Now would be the time." Chloe stared at him. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. She looked at the evidence bag. She looked at the phone. She looked at me. In my gaze, she found no mercy, no softness, only the implacable truth of her own actions reflected back at her. Her shoulders slumped. The fight left her body in a visible rush. "I want a lawyer," she whispered. Detective Miller nodded. He stood up. "Chloe Hayes, you are under arrest for the attempted murder of Eleanor Hayes and for conspiracy to commit murder. You have the right to remain silent." He began reciting the Miranda rights, his voice a steady drone. Chloe did not look at me again. She stared at the floor, her body trembling as the words she had once thought would grant her freedom now shackled her completely. The words of the Miranda rights filled the living room, a dry legal recitation that seemed to leach the remaining warmth from the air. Chloe stood still as Detective Miller finished. He did not handcuff her immediately. Instead, he took out his police radio and requested a patrol unit for transport. "Please sit down, Miss Hayes," he said, gesturing again to the sofa. She sat, her body rigid, her eyes fixed on a point on the carpet. The defiance was gone, replaced by a numb shock. Miller turned to me. "Mrs. Hayes, I will need to take your phone as evidence, as you offered. I will also need to search your daughter's purse and her room for the original medication and any other evidence. Do I have your consent to search those areas of your home?" "You do," I said. I pointed to the kitchen. "Her purse is on the chair at the table. It's a large leather tote." He nodded and walked into the kitchen. I stayed in the living room. I did not look at Chloe. I listened to the sounds, the snap of the purse clasp, the rustle as he searched. He returned a moment later, holding the small orange vial. He examined the label through his gloves. "This has no pharmacy label," he noted. "It is the bottle she brought into the house," I said. It should contain my legitimate blood pressure pills. He opened it and shook a few into his palm. They were identical to the ones in the evidence bag, but these were the real ones, the ones she had removed to make the switch. I'll take this as well. He bagged it, labeling it with a marker from his pocket. Then he looked at Chloe. Miss Hayes, I need to check your room. Will you show me, or shall I? She did not move or speak. She was shut down. I'll show you, I said. I led him down the hall to the guest room. The room was neat, her suitcase open on a stand, clothes folded inside. Her laptop was on the desk. Miller conducted a quick, efficient search. He opened drawers, looked under the bed, checked the suitcase pockets. He did not find anything else of obvious evidentiary value. He did, however, collect her phone from the bedside table. I'll need a warrant for the contents, but I'm securing it for now, he told me. We returned to the living room. The sound of a car pulling into the driveway broke the silence. Headlights swept across the front window. 2 uniformed officers came to the door. Miller let them in. He briefed them quietly. One of the officers, a younger woman, came and stood near Chloe. Miss Hayes, I need to place you in handcuffs now. Please stand and turn around. The mechanical instructions seemed to jolt Chloe back to awareness. She stood, but instead of turning, she looked at me. Her eyes were wide, pleading. Mom, please. You don't have to do this. Tell them it was a mistake, a misunderstanding. I'm your daughter. I met her gaze. I said nothing. You're ruining my life. The plea turned into a sharp cry. Over what? A stupid conversation? I wasn't really going to do it. I was just talking. You're being paranoid. Detective Miller interjected, his voice flat. The evidence suggests otherwise, Miss Hayes. The switched medication is not a conversation, it's an act. She made me do it, Chloe shouted, pointing a shaking finger at me. She's always been controlling. She never let me live my own life. She's punishing me for moving out. This is her way of keeping me under her thumb. It was a desperate, ugly tactic. Blame the victim, paint me as the manipulator. I remained silent. My calm in the face of her hysteria was its own rebuttal. The female officer gently took Chloe's arm. Turn around, please. Chloe resisted for a second, then capitulated. She turned. The officer applied the handcuffs with a series of precise clicks. The sound was metallic, definitive. Chloe's shoulders hunched as the metal tightened around her wrists. Mom! Sio, she sobbed, twisting her head to look at me over her shoulder. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Please don't let them take me. I didn't mean it. This was the begging, the final stage. The tears were real now, born of terror and consequence. They did not move me. I had cried my tears in the silent hours of the night. These were hers, for herself alone. Detective Miller stepped forward, blocking her view of me. You have invoked your right to an attorney, Miss Hayes. I advise you to stop speaking now. Anything you say can still be used against you. She choked back another sob, her head dropping. Miller turned to me. Mrs. Hayes, I'll need you to come to the station tomorrow to give a formal, videotaped statement. An advocate from the Elder Services Unit will be present if you wish. For tonight, these officers will remain to secure the scene until a detective from the Major Crimes Unit arrives to process it. They may take photographs. Is that acceptable? It is, I said. You'll also need to get a new prescription filled immediately. Do not stay in this house without your necessary medication. I will take care of it first thing in the morning. He handed me a business card. My direct line is on the back. Call if you need anything before tomorrow. I'm very sorry you had to go through this. I took the card. Thank you, Detective. The officers led Chloe toward the door. She was walking, but her steps were small, shuffling. She did not look back again. They guided her out into the cool night. I saw the silhouette of her hunched form being helped into the back of the patrol car through the open doorway. The door closed with a solid thud. The car's interior light went off, leaving her a dark shape behind glass. Detective Miller stayed for a few more minutes, coordinating with the uniforms. He played the relevant section of the recording from my phone, using earbuds. I saw his jaw tighten slightly as he listened. He nodded to himself, confirming what he already knew. "This is a strong case, Mrs. Hayes," he said to me quietly after removing the earbuds. "The premeditation is clear. The evidence is direct. It may be painful, but the system will work for you here." "I believe it will," I said. He left soon after, taking the evidence bags and my phone, leaving me a receipt for the items. The two uniformed officers remained, one in the living room, one by the front door. They were respectful and quiet. I went to the kitchen and put the kettle on for tea. It was a mechanical action. The house felt different. It was no longer a battlefield. It was a crime scene, and soon it would just be a house again. My house. The poisonous presence had been physically removed. The tension that had thickened the air for 2 days was gone, leaving a strange, hollow silence in its wake. I took my tea to the dining room and sat at the table. I did not look at the chair where her purse had been. I listened to the low murmur of the officers talking on their radios. I sipped the hot liquid. I felt no triumph. I felt no joy. I felt a profound, echoing emptiness. But it was a clean emptiness, like a wound that has been properly cleaned and debrided, painful but free of infection. The rot was gone. Now the healing could begin, a process that would be long and quiet and entirely my own. The law was in motion. It would grind forward with its procedures and its paperwork. My role was nearly over. I had provided the evidence. I had told the truth. I had ensured justice would be delivered by the proper channels. That was what I had wanted, not a screaming confrontation, not a violent act of revenge, a cold, factual, legal conclusion. I sat at the table until my tea was gone. Then I stood, rinsed the cup, and placed it in the dishwasher. I informed the officers I would be in my bedroom if they needed me. I went down the hall. I passed the bathroom but did not look inside. I entered my room and closed the door. I did not lock it. For the first time in 2 nights, I felt no need to. I woke at my usual time just after 7. The house was silent. Not the tense, listening silence of the previous days, but a simple, empty quiet. The police had finished their work and left sometime in the early hours. A card from the lead detective was on the kitchen counter, noting their departure. The only remnant of their presence was a faint dusty residue on some surfaces where they had lifted fingerprints. I performed my morning routine. I showered. I dressed in comfortable clothes. I went to the kitchen. The glass of water from 2 nights ago was still on the counter, the condensation long dried. I washed it and put it away. I made a single cup of tea. I did not turn on the radio for news. The silence was a companion I needed to reacquaint myself with. My first task was practical. I needed my medication. I called my pharmacy. I explained that my current bottle had been confiscated as evidence in a police investigation. The pharmacist, a woman named Annette who has known me for years, asked no probing questions. She said she could have a new supply ready for pickup in an hour. I thanked her. I drove to the pharmacy. The morning was bright, cool. The mundane act of driving my car, seeing neighbors walking dogs, the routine of the world continuing, it was grounding. At the pharmacy, Annette handed me the small bag. Her expression was professionally neutral, but her eyes held a quiet kindness. "Is everything all right, Mrs. Hayes?" she asked gently. "It will be," I said, and I meant it. I returned home. I placed the new, correct bottle in the medicine cabinet, clearing away the dusty space where the other had been. I took my morning dose with a glass of water from the kitchen tap. The ritual was restored, but its meaning was forever altered. It was no longer an act of trust, but an act of self-preservation. I was okay with that. Later that morning, Detective Miller called. His tone was respectful, updates delivered in clear, factual terms. Chloe had been formally charged with attempted murder and conspiracy. She was being held without bail due to the severity and premeditation. The district attorney's office was reviewing the evidence, which they considered strong. The pills from the switched bottle had been sent to the lab for urgent analysis. But the existence of the two bottles, one with no label, one from my cabinet, combined with the recording, formed a compelling case. A preliminary hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks hence. A victim advocate would contact me to guide me through the process. I thanked him. I asked no questions about Chloe's state, her pleas, her reactions. That was no longer my concern. My concern had been to stop her and to see the law applied. That was happening. After the call, I moved through the house. I stripped the bed in the guest room. I gathered the sheets and towels and started a load of laundry. I opened the windows in that room to let in the fresh air. I did not pack Chloe's belongings. The police had taken some items as evidence. The rest could stay boxed in the room for now. Dealing with it was a task for another day, one that held no urgency. I made myself lunch, a simple sandwich. I ate it at the kitchen table, reading a magazine article about container gardening. The words held my attention in a way they hadn't for weeks. In the afternoon, I felt a need for a different kind of order. I went to my home office. I turned on the computer. I opened the folder labeled Finances. I opened my will. I called my attorney, Mr. Davies. I informed him of the situation in broad strokes. I instructed him to draft a codicil removing Chloe as my beneficiary and executor. I named my sister Linda instead. He expressed his shock and sympathy, then got to work. He said he would messenger the documents over for my signature tomorrow. The mechanism of disinheritance was a cold, clinical process. It felt appropriate. With that done, I closed the financial files. My eyes fell on the framed photograph on my desk, the one I had turned face down. I righted it. I looked at the image of my younger self and my smiling child. After a long moment, I opened my desk drawer. I took out a different frame. This picture was older, faded at the edges. It showed my mother and me. I was perhaps 16. We were standing in front of her first house, a small clapboard she worked 2 jobs to keep. She had her arm around my shoulders, her face stern but her eyes proud. She was a woman who knew struggle, who knew betrayal, and who had endured through sheer, uncompromising will. I removed the picture of Chloe and me from the frame. I placed it in the desk drawer. I put the picture of my mother and me into the frame and set it back on the desk. It looked right. It was a reclamation of a different lineage, a different kind of strength. The phone rang again. It was Linda. Word travels fast in families, even across state lines. She had heard from a cousin of a cousin about an arrest. Her voice was thick with tears, not for Chloe, but for me. "Ellie, my God, are you all right? What can I do? I can be on a plane tonight." "I'm all right, Linda," I said, and for the first time I heard the truth of it in my own voice. "Truly, don't come tonight. Maybe in a few weeks. The house is quiet. I need the quiet." She understood. We talked for 30 minutes. I gave her the basic facts. She did not press for more. She offered no platitudes, just a steady, solid presence on the other end of the line. It was what I needed. As evening approached, I felt neither tired nor restless. I went into the backyard. The small garden plot was still bare from winter. I found my trowel and gardening gloves in the shed. I knelt on the soft earth. I began to turn the soil, breaking up the cold clumps. The physical work was good. The smell of damp earth was clean and promising. I worked until the light began to fade and my knees ached. I came inside, washed my hands, and made a light dinner. I ate it in the living room, watching a nature documentary on television. I followed the narrative without distraction. When it was time for bed, I took my new medication. I brushed my teeth. I got into bed. I read a chapter of my book. I turned out the light. I lay in the dark. I listened to the sounds of the house, the hum of the refrigerator, the creak of the old oak tree branch outside my window, the distant whistle of a train. They were just sounds. They held no hidden meaning, no threat. The sorrow was there, a deep, permanent river running beneath everything. The loss of my daughter, not to death, but to a monstrous choice, was a fact I would carry for the rest of my life. But it was not the only fact. Above that river was solid ground, the ground of my own actions, the ground of justice, the ground of a quiet, safe house. I had not gotten vengeance. Vengeance is hot and chaotic and leaves its own poison behind. I had sought justice. Justice is cold, clear, and procedural. It leaves a space for peace to grow. I closed my eyes. I did not dream of whispers in hallways or of pills in my hand. I slept through the night, and when I woke to the morning sun painting a bright rectangle on my bedroom floor, I felt rested. The silence in the house was no longer empty. It was full of potential. It was mine.